SJC, Stanley J. Clark, and see if I can have an opportunity to talk to somebody and propose an idea to them.
Okay, you have two properties there, one just a little bit east of the other one, are they adjoining, is that what you're talking about, Stanley J. Clark
Well, and Draper, yeah,
and Drake?
yeah,
But Stanley J. Clark is the one right on the corner there.
correct, correct.
You say you want to talk to Clark?
Yeah, I'll research the information, on how to get a hold of Stanley J. Clark and,
See, I remember that name, I remember that bulk plant, but I don't know any of them, or,
I don't either.
well, that'd be wonderful, Scott. Let's have you do that, and, or you take a hold of that, and then we'll work on through this and see where we're going with it.
Okay.
Our plan has always been to have 3 ambulance garages, a new one there, one at Florida, and one up by Yeoman. And, it's trying to do the next one.
I agree with it.
We're at 10.
We did the EDC already.
Yep.
That's something like that.
Pending litigation and courthouse gun signage.
Okay, we'll take the first one first.
Okay.
The notice is a tort claim regarding, the felony involving the deputies. It's all in the hands of the insurance company now, it's all been referred. The only one that's not covered by insurance is, the only case that's not covered by insurance is the suit by the, Angeles and Lasky and Sue White against the county and the election board. And, that case is in the stage of, motions to dismiss and be filed by me and by the election board's attorney from Lafayette. And the hearing's not been set yet, they were filed just last Friday, so that's the stage where that is right now, so. That's the only thing I wanted to report is that, the case involving the election board has been responded to, and I think I distributed copies of the legal memorandum and motion that you got, so if you got any questions about that?
I do. Just showing my ignorance, but define the word tort.
A tort is a legal wrong. It can be negligence or it can be violation of some harm to another person.
Which is what I asked you about, is where's the harm to these people, right?
That's the basis, that's one of the bases of the motion to dismiss. On the matter of the signage on the courthouse, I'm gonna suggest that the board, I would like to table that and that to get some input from the courts. The legislature's been active in this area, and one of the things that I'm seeing, that I've seen in the Indiana statutes is that you have to have an officer, at least one officer, and you have to be able to check people as they come in to give guns. So, we probably need to review the security anyway. And the sheriff pointed out to me that he presented, maybe not this last year, but presented in the past, some kind of a plan to have a security presence of the sheriff's department in the courthouse. And I think that needs to be revisited during budget time. So I've got some information to share with the commissioners. I don't think it should be in a public meeting because it is a security matter. It can't, a strategy with regard to security, I think it needs to be in an executive session. And this is also something that is part of what Mike has you know, the continuity plan and the security and all that, it all fits in with that too. The court is primarily, deals with court security, and each court in Indiana, is supposed to have its own security plan, separate and apart from whatever the county, wherever they are. But they can't have an effective plan without participation by the county. So, it's both bodies that are involved, the courts and the commissioners, so, that's what I wanted to report on that.
How do we keep the ball rolling on this? Because I've seen this come up over and over and over, and we all sit here and we, yeah, and then that's it. That's as far as we go with it.
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
Most of
Supposed
the
to have
time,
every answer for me here, Ted.
most of the time it comes down that we get it all planned out. When I sat on the council, it come to us back then. We didn't have the money to fund for the extra stuff like that. And then it just disappears there.
I think that this is something that needs to be considered in the American Rescue Plan funds. Whatever. This is like records, you know, there are wants and there are needs. The needs are the ones that the statutes and the rules and liability put upon counties. And record preservation is one of those, and you provide for that. I think courthouse security is there too.
That's a potential thing, because, provide, have in-house security.
Right.
You're providing wages and stuff.
Personnel, yes,
You can set it up properly under the rescue plan.
but I'm talking about the equipment that is required. And the Indiana Judicial Conference, and they may have already done it in their June meeting, they were working on a list of things, and they have a sheriff on the Judicial Conference on court security, Mike Brannon from Morris County. He's working on a list of equipment that the county should have for security, and one of the judges on the committee, on the court security committee, is working on what the minimum that county should have. This is not just Carroll County that has this issue. So, this information is coming out, because I reading between the lines, I think they're having problems in other counties not having adequate security for the courts. So, the fact that we've got the potential to be able to get anything equipment-wise with the ARP funds, presents an opportunity. But you're right, that the long-term thing, that sustainability has to do with having personnel. And it involves either having an officer at every entrance or one officer and blocking entrances. That's the reality of it. And equipment too, because it also protects, the statute also protects the rights of persons who are not otherwise prohibited from having firearms to have those in courthouse.
Say that last thing again, I missed.
I'll read the statute. And I don't know if this got added in, when it got added in. The building that contains a courtroom may not prohibit or restrict it, except as provided in subdivision 5, and that, you gotta read all the qualifiers, but, and part of the qualifiers are the prohibition and the stepping and closing of entrances and so forth. But once you've done that, it says that the building contains a courtroom, a unit may not prohibit or restrict possession of a handgun under this subdivision in the building owned or administered by the unit, if the person who possesses the handgun is not otherwise prohibited from carrying or possessing a handgun.
So,
It doesn't necessarily keep them out. That's what the statute says. So, and the courts, and when I said the courts, the conference is working on this issue, so I think that this is an area that's being worked on right now. And again, it involves the legislature and the courts, so. But this is just part of
In the state statute, though, or the federal, that where we can't have it in a government building?
the federal, and, you know, there's a whole list of places you can't, because it's federally connected in some way. Even state recreation areas, that are leased from the federal government, you can't take a handgun in, those, so it's pretty complicated, but we definitely need to revisit the courthouse security and the gun policy. It does not appear to comply, you know, without some kind of, additional steps being taken.
Okay. Well, I hope you keep us apprised of
Okay.
any change in there.
We're gathering information, and, when I think we've got enough information, we'll ask you to schedule an executive session.
I think it was it after the Oklahoma bombing or someplace back there? Well, that may be too far back, but it's been quite a number of years ago. We had, federal people come in and give us a list of things that we should consider here, and it included cutting shrubbery around the
Yeah.
building and all that kind of stuff, and we did a lot of that.
2007, you had a US Marshal survey.
What?
2007, you had a US Marshal survey done.
You're saying we haven't done much since then?
No.
You had a US Marshal survey done in 2007.
US Marshal, yeah, okay. Well, that's something we need to be looking at, especially budget time. Anything else to come before the commissioners? Yes, sir.
I would just say too, to add on to that,
Yeah.
that's why I came down, because I saw the signage thing was on the agenda. The statute says that the sheriff shall provide security to the court. And thus far, my predecessors nor I have said to the sheriff, you shall come over and secure the, now, the reality, they've come over when we've, you know, had an issue that we needed to call them, but I don't know when those issues are gonna pop up, and certainly, I think everybody would agree, we live in different times than we did 5-10 years ago. And so the sheriff has been, you know, more than, willing to accommodate us when we need it every single time. But, you know, something happens when we don't know that it's gonna happen, we're gonna be, you know, up a creek, so to speak. But, you know, the other thing is, I don't wanna be the judge that says, Sheriff, you're gonna send 2 or 3 people over and man the courthouse, because where they're gonna come straight off the road. Because the sheriff's statutory obligation is not to patrol the road, it's to do other functions. Now, of course, we know we need them, and I'm not gonna be the one who says, take them off the road, but we need to deal with that ahead of budget time, I think, and it needs to be done privately, as he said, because it's a security issue, and it needs to include Mike, with his wealth of knowledge and the stuff that he's already put together, so, I would welcome that to happen sooner rather than later, especially given budget time, so, and it's gonna have to, you know, the sheriff, you know, or the new sheriff at least, ahead of time, because at the last judicial conference, unfortunately, because I'm younger, I'm sitting in the front, so I can't see behind me, but the Chief Justice says, raise your hands if you don't have court security.
Cool.
Hand up, and she said, Judge, enforce the law. I said, well, that's helpful, but, you know, so that's, I mean, it's there, and, you know, basically the answer was, just go tell them they have to do it. And I said, well, okay, but, you know, I've gotta, you know, work there every day. So, we know it's a situation we gotta deal with. I'm glad you brought it up, so if we could do something, quickly, that would be wonderful, so, thank you.
Thank you. What we definitely don't want to do is suddenly say, we should have done something
After,
after something happened.
well, we just had a big court case last week, wasn't it, or the week before, where he sentenced the man to over 200 years.
Right.
It's a serious situation.
When I worked over there, we brought people over that probably needed at least 3 or 4, and we only had 1 or 2.
And ironically, it's not always the criminal cases that are the ones I'm worried about.
Exactly.
It's the other ones. so.
About 5 or 6 judges back, I was told by one of the judges, he said that some of the scariest ones are the family dispute ones. And he
Yep.
said the scariest he'd ever had was a grandfather
Yeah.
who was upset because of losing access to his grandchild. And they picked him up in the alley over here, and what a good situation. Okay, anything else come before them? Yes, sure.
Real quick, 54 in-house and 5 out.
Wow, how are you getting 64 in there?
Unfortunately, some are sleeping on the floor, they have mats, but they're on the floor.
Why aren't they taking them somewhere else?
We're working on that, Lauren.
Can't get space?
White County's starting to swell, as I alluded to a few months back. And we have some that are eligible to go to Department of Corrections, but Department of Corrections dictates anymore as to when we can bring those individuals to them.
No, so they open the doors for you, but they guard the door, huh?
They're only gonna take the good ones.
Yeah.
They don't want the trouble, Mayor.
While the sheriff more or less has the floor here, I wanna say I really appreciate some of the work that's done this weekend. There was a bad situation up in the northern area up there, and could have been a very bad situation, and they did a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir. A couple meetings ago, I mentioned the Duke Energy grant that I ordered weather radios. Those came in, I posted it out this morning on my Facebook page, that I got 200 of them, and 2 minutes after I posted it, my phone started blowing up. So, they're going out as fast as,
what's going on?
the weather radios that I
Oh, yeah.
ordered through that grant.
Yeah.
They came in the week before I went to that training,
Uh-huh.
which was last week. But they're in, we'll start handing them out today, and they'll be there until they're gone.
You just have it, is anybody that requests them can get them, or is it, certain, the people that are outside of the
It's
siren
the
area?
outlying areas, but I had a phone call from an older gentleman that's right on the outskirts of Delphi, 90 years old. that he'll get that.
Yeah, that's wonderful, you got
2
them.
blocks from the siren out.
Well, they are outdoor warning sirens also, they're not meant for indoors.
I don't think I want that.
That's why you also have code red and all that other stuff. Also, before I went to training, Tippecanoe Township had called me and asked me to meet with them and the trustee and their board. They're looking at purchasing a outdoor warning siren and placing it somewhere outside of Pittsburgh, up on the northwest side. They're looking at purchasing it through their funding, and
We're doing an additional appropriation on the 15th.
okay, so they're looking at doing an additional on it. One of the questions that they asked me to come back and ask the commissioners if the county would be willing to take up the maintenance part of that, afterwards. So they pay for the siren and then we maintain it.
Was it about $1,500 a year per siren?
No, it's about 500 per siren
500 per siren?
right now.
Well,
And I mean, it's a pretty
do we do?
decent,
How many do we do the maintenance on?
we do the 3 on the river. The rest of them, yes, sir, those are the only 3 that the county owns. All the other sirens are maintained, or should be maintained by the townships or the incorporated towns.
So Tippecanoe Township is asking us to maintain theirs, but the other townships we do not maintain.
No,
That's kind of tough. I mean, I think it'd be great to have a siren up there.
I agree too. Money Camden, I think it's maintained by Camden. I believe.
right. Camden maintains theirs, Burlington, they just reached out, one of their town board members just reached out to me and asked who I use to do maintenance on mine, so I gave him that information.
Then I believe Florida does their own maintenance.
Florida does their own maintenance. I think Rockfield, which has the oldest siren in the county, I think the fire department does their maintenance on it. It's a simple, air raid siren.
You got a squirrel over
You got,
But
we have one in Cutler too, is it?
Cutler's is, I think the fire department takes care of theirs. The one in Cutler.
The township couldn't manage that $500 a year?
That,
Well,
Jack,
if I can add, I'm on the advisory board. Part of the reason why Mike and I have discussed this is, if you remember a few years ago, Mike was proposing trying to organize the maintenance on the sirens.
Right.
Most of the townships and that owned them weren't interested in letting anybody else deal with it. Our approach is, if we can get it to where, into the system that's already in place, and several of the sirens that are covered are part of our township, then the continuity of everything going forward, it doesn't matter what happens with the trustees, you know, it's in the county plan. If you weren't willing to do the funding part of it, the other thing we would look at doing is, can we have it to where we pay the fee, but it's all done with your system, so that,
Done with our system.
yeah, through
So
my,
I
Oh, done.
the maintenance.
With
done
the
at
maintenance,
same
yeah.
time as the maintenance
is
on my-
part of that, so that everything's getting scheduled, getting taken care of when it should be, and so that's,
Well, you know, putting up a new one, that thing shouldn't need any maintenance for the next 4 or 5
No,
years.
but
You
there's
do
an annual
You
inspection.
wanna do annual inspections, make sure all your gears are good, and the squirrels haven't climbed the pole and chewed on the wire.
Right. You would know when it goes off, wouldn't you? I mean, if it
Right.
goes off.
If it didn't go off on the monthly test, they usually get a phone call
Yeah.
from
It
citizens.
used to be back when you did the monthly test, the fire departments would call in, our siren has went off, or our siren.
Right,
is not
and they
going.
do, when they do the monthly test, if it's near one that, you know, the incorporated areas or one of the fire departments, they will call back and acknowledge that they went off. I've developed some relationships with some people on the river now that, hey, the siren went off, or no, it didn't go off, or, and they'll let me know.
It was nice getting the code red thing on the siren and the email. letting
Oh, to
us know
remind.
For the parade. I think it's something we need to look at, Jack, cause I think it might be opening a can of worms with the other townships, like, hey, they're doing that one, why don't you do ours?
well, except the other townships, when it was discussed before, weren't
Yeah, but now-
interested in it.
Most of your
So,
townships now have probably got newer people sitting in office.
yeah, I know several of them do, or more new ones coming.
I just figured it would be, since they were doing it this time, it's a good time to discuss it, since we're getting ready to go into budget, so I need to know how.
Are we in a contract with their people that do services, or just call them as needed?
We're under contract with them, so if, like when we had the problem with the sirens last fall, they came out, they're out of Ohio, so.
So they can do the contract with them separately if we do not decide to put them on.
I'll get the information to them, and the federal signal will also, when it gets installed, will let them know, hey, this is who they recommend, but you can always go with any.
Well, we appreciate the thought of putting siren in, we just gotta make sure how we're gonna maintain it.
Well, and that's why we're dealing with it, and
Being on top of the hill up there, I think it's a good place. It'll definitely reach the people.
yeah, well, and we've got all of Delmont Farm, that subdivision is now filled, and the unit that Mike was recommending has a 1.1 3/8 mile radius for the 70 decibel coverage or whatever. And, so that would reach that would cover, you know, the,
It'll interlock our
Pittsburgh.
Tecumseh Bend siren and the Carrollton Road siren. So from Carrollton Road, kind of banging around right up 421 out to Delmont Farms back through Tiffany.
You should real cover the area.
That swath of area out there.
I notice the difference when, which way the winds blow.
And it does, you know, and wind affects everything as well. And there's days that I can hear the Burlington siren and I'm on the cusp of it. And
Can you
there's
hear it?
On certain days I can hear it, and then there's other days that I can't.
Depends on where it's rotating. In Camden, I'm like 3 blocks from it, but I can also hear Flores.
You can hear floors?
Yeah, it depends, because you can hear 2 different,
My
Not very
dogs
often.
usually hear it first and they start joining in.
But I'll continue with the NOAA radios as long as I can keep finding to keep pushing more and more out.
Good, we appreciate it.
how's the
Thank
new
you.
building doing okay?
So far, so good.
Huh?
Take a walk.
His request.
Yeah, we just wanna hear more about it, see how they're coming along on putting it in. Anything else coming before the board?
Motion to adjourn, sir.
Motion adjourned, second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned, thank you all for attending, we appreciate it.